welcome to another episode of Inquiring Minds. I'm Steve Harper, and with me, as always, is my amazing co-host, Donna Carlin. Donna, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I can't wait for your response to today's topic. So I'm
I'm a
ready to
little
go.
nervous, I got to say. You said, hey, do you want to talk about these before we go? And I said, no, let's just record. And then as I hit record, I'm thinking to myself, maybe I should have thought about that first.
Yeah.
What are we talking about today?
So I had a really great conversation with one of my favorite clients yesterday, and I shouldn't say one of my favorite, but seriously, he is one of my favorite clients, and that was because of a bunch of insights from some of our conversations and some of the feedback that I've been getting personally, which I really really appreciate from multiple people, not just one specific client, and so it caused me to create three questions.
Okay.
And it starts off with the main question, which is my behavior reasonably consistent from one situation to the next? And I'll tell you why I'm asking these questions, because
Okay.
that's important afterwards. And then what would I observe if I watched myself? Now, remember, I'm a shadow coach, so I shadow people as well as work with shadow.
Yep.
So if I ask somebody to be a reflective practitioner and to really be self-observant, that's a question that I often ask. Like, what would I observe if I watched myself? And then sometimes I would add within this situation, that kind of thing. And lastly, what would I want people to observe when they see me interact with others? So, what is my desired intention for what I want people to see of me and in me? And I think those are really great reflective questions to ask ourselves.
Yeah, they are. Start with the first one so I can give an impression on that more directly.
So with some people, I'm speaking globally, not for one individual. Sometimes when you're about to give a presentation to senior leadership, you get nervous. You try to impress.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, you're trying to be what you think they want you to be within that presentation, or to be something that's not comfortable for you. And if it's not comfortable for you, there will be a touch of struggle in there that will probably be apparent to those that you're presenting to. Same thing to, you're going to meet your future in-laws, or you're going on a first date or a second date, that kind of thing. You want to be what you believe the other person wants you to be. So there's inconsistency in your behavior.
Yep.
And then what happens is, for some, it's not like they get into trouble. For people meeting people for the first time, it might get them into trouble the second and third time, because that's not the person I initially met, right? And, why are you so different all of a sudden? That's because you were trying to impress or trying to be someone that you're not, or nervous about something and didn't deal with the fears and all of that. So in one of my conversations, I actually asked for feedback from a client saying, do you see a different side of me? Because, he had seen all different contexts of me in a social context, team, dinner, one-on-one, like all of with his boss, with another boss. So, do you see differences in the way that I hold myself in my being or whatever? The answer was immediately, absolutely not. And then we talked about it. What do you need to do in order to be yourself in any context, so that your behavior is absolutely consistent? It's a known entity. If they say, this is Steve. So no matter what context you're going to go in or who's recommending you to whom, this is Steve. I can
Yeah.
tell you what Steve is like, no airs. He says what he believes. Like, honestly, this is Steve. And the great part about that is that there's no hidden pretenses. There's no personas. None of that exists. It's so much easier on you when you are you.
Yeah. Yeah. And easier on other people to describe you.
Definitely. Yeah, because just think for a moment, somebody's going to recommend Steve to somebody else because that's their experience of you, and a different Steve walks through the door because you think you need to be a different way because it's a different circumstance. And that, ends up biting you because the other person gets that feedback. That's not the Steve that you recommended to me.
Yeah.
That's not
Yeah.
my experience of him.
I've had that situation where someone was describing someone else to me that, that they were the most warm, giving individual you could imagine. And they walked into this particular meeting and there was this air of superiority and attitude that kind of like, I'm so important. Why am I even here? And you're immediately questioning, hey, is this the right person? Number one is because this is not the person that was described to me. And number two, you start to second guess the person who, made the suggestion that we get together. Right. So it has there's more than just one, negative impact to that by people not showing up and being authentic. And what was interesting about this particular scenario was because of the group of individuals that this individual was coming into, he felt like he had to be a certain way to exhibit a certain level of what he believed to be confident, but everybody else read as arrogance. And, at the end of the day, calls the person that put him in touch with me originally and said, I think I completely blew it. I just didn't feel like I was on. I felt like I just, didn't have a good meeting with these guys because it didn't, I didn't come across my, the way I wanted to. I think I was too aggressive. And so they recognized it in the moment, but, I totally get what you're saying. And I think it's, we've probably all experienced a situation like that, but how often are we actually putting the lens back over ourselves to look and review how we conduct ourselves in whatever situation we might find ourselves?
Funny you should say that. So that goes to the second question, right?
Mm-hmm.
What would I observe if I watched myself?
Yep.
So if you did a post-mortem, I don't know what else to call it.
That's what I call it.
Yeah, and afterwards, and feedback with yourself, was I myself? And if I started feeling uncomfortable or that I had to prove or convince, prove myself or convince somebody else, then I'm no longer myself. So that goes to the third question. What do I want them to observe when I'm interacting in multiple situations or with multiple people? And the answer, I'm not going to say should be. I think we're in the best possible place when the answer is me.
Yeah.
Just observe me, not trying to prove anything, not trying to impress, not trying to convince. When we try to convince somebody, we're already behind the eight ball. Gauge with, wonderful. Let them know who you are. Let them connect with you because you're such an amazing person, Mr. Steve. So, there you go. It's a great reflective question because that speaks to one of the previous shows that we talked about, being on intention.
Yeah.
Is our intention to be me through every situation that comes up?
I like
what
that.
do you need to do? Yeah.
Well, it's very timely for me. I'm working on a keynote for an organization that I'm going to be delivering this presentation to, and one of the things that I'm starting to look at to get people thinking about how they connect in the world is to actually, we all have a really honest view of ourselves if we actually ask those questions like you're suggesting. And it does require a reminder to do that from time to time. And so one of the things that I'm proposing to this audience is, what is the thing that you wish you could change when you connect with other people? And almost everybody will come up with that one thing, right? I'm looking at the extremes that I'll use an example. I'm either way too shy or I'm an over talker, right? I say too much. And that, if you could fix that, right, what would that mean? And how could that change the perception that people would have of you, right? So it's kind of like what you said, when you start thinking about, I just saw this TED Talk. We actually just did a TED Talk for a few months back for the Ripple membership where we featured Lovey Jones, I think is her last name. She had this great kind of, focus similar to the questions you're asking. Who are you at your core? Who are you? How do you want the world to view you, right? And then how does the world view you? And similar, kind of lens and filter. And so as I was preparing these comments for, my presentation, I was looking at it from sort of polar opposites and how the negative ripples kind of ripple from there, right? If I'm too shy, people might think I'm aloof or obtuse, or I'm arrogant, or I'm disinterested, and those things have a negative impact for how people view me. If I'm over talking, they may feel like I'm lack, or maybe I'm overconfident, or I'm not inclusive because I'm not really paying attention to what everybody else is saying because I'm more focused on what I have to say. There's also that air of aggressiveness that comes across. And so you enter into the, sort of that arena of evaluating where and how you communicate and how you, or what you would want to change. And you start going down the rabbit hole of, if you don't change, look at all these different potential outcomes that occur. It's kind of along the lines of those three questions, right? Figuring out how you want the world to see you starts with how you want to see yourself in that world. And that's a critical component, I think, for us to really evaluate. And it's a great opportunity for us to do it in every situation. Having a conversation with a good friend. How did I come across? What did I do? How did I show up and represent in that scenario? How did I show up in today's staff meeting, or, in front of that customer, or talking to, that prospect? Looking through that lens where you can really, like you said, go through that postmortem to really evaluate really has a huge impact for not only seeing things that you probably do, if pushed, would want to change and fix. And the only way you do that is by shining a light on it to say, yeah, I know I could do better here or there. But also from a perspective of, hey, what really worked? And how do I get more of that? And how do I create great opportunities for every conversation that occurs, every opportunity to engage with another person, to have that positive outcome? So I love the fact that we're sort of talking about it, and it's really ironic that I literally was working on those remarks this morning, thinking through this concept, and again, had no idea we were going to be talking about it today, but I'm glad we are.
Yeah, it's very cool. And then you look at the multiple levels of this, right? Because how do you stay true to yourself, your authentic self, when you're interacting with somebody who's going to criticize that authentic self? Then what do you do? And
I have the
that's
suggestion based on what you've shared with us in the past, which I have used multiple times over the last few months, is their opinion, is none of my business.
that's right.
Which is hard because you have people that are certainly free with their opinion. They'll vocalize it or verbalize it either to you or to others. And that becomes more difficult for you to create that wall and that barrier to not let it affect you or compromise your confidence when you're around those people.
But for me, it doesn't compromise my confidence. What it does is I ask the question, are you asking for what you don't give in return? Why does somebody think that they have the right to tell me how to behave, who to be friends with, who I might favor over others that I don't favor? That whatever they want, they should be able to click their fingers, and that's what I am obliged to give. Life doesn't work that way. So it doesn't screw up my confidence.
Yeah.
My question is, do you actually believe that you have the right to tell me how to behave with others, and that you feel that I don't measure up when it comes to how I treat you over others that I might have known like 100 years longer? There's so many different criteria, and
Sure.
I don't put up with that stuff anymore
But that's
because
the beautiful thing about you, right? You have reached that level where you are that self-aware and that confident. And I think that the vast majority of people don't really unpackage this enough, which is why we have these conversations to get to that level, right? They just,
that's
well,
right.
that's just how I am. And thinking back to my remarks, it's like, well, people's default behavior is, well, I can't change. That's just the way I do it, or that's just the way I respond and react. And the reality is, you can change it if you're motivated and inspired enough to be that, and, be in control of those situations, which is where you are, right? At that level of confidence to ask those questions and be able to put it into a framework that allows you to not take some negative feedback personally. Maybe there's something positive that can be pulled out of whatever the negative is. But for the most part, you're also looking at it from, where's this coming from? What's the source? Why does their opinion have to impact or affect mine, of myself, my content, whatever? And I really love that about it, because I think it's so
Yeah.
empowering for people to look at this and really apply this approach to their own life.
So I had a great call with somebody from the Ripple that I spoke at,
Mm-hmm.
like in the pond, and she asked if she could have a call with me. And one of the questions that she asked me was, "Have you always been so understanding and sure of yourself? Like, have you always like known your own mind, so
Yeah.
to speak? And or where did it come from? How did you learn to do that?" And I stopped for a minute. And said, "I think I've been like that my entire life, but I'm going to ask my mother," which I actually did. I I asked my mother, and she says, "You've been like that your entire life. You knew exactly what was right, exactly what you needed to go after. I used to tell you to do things, you'd nod, and you did whatever you wanted anyway." And it's interesting because I think my intuitive nature is so strong that I knew that I would, um, like the path that I was taking was the right one for me. And that's why everyone sees me in exactly the same light. It's because I go with my core. I go with what I absolutely know is right for me. And I will not be what everyone else wants me to be, because then I'm going to lose myself.
Yep.
And that doesn't work for anybody. So I'd be really interested to hear how this resonates with some of our listeners,
I would
because,
as
you
well.
know, do you ever take the time to ask yourself the question, is my behavior consistent? Seriously,
Yeah.
look at it from that perspective. And if it's not, then I would invite them to look at the why. Why do you think it isn't consistent? And where do you struggle? Where do you shine? And try to merge the two so that it starts being consistent.
Yep. Yeah, I like that. I think that's a really excellent approach to the the direction and sort of the sort of the carry forward strategy. And I think that that's where it starts, right, in those questions and being in the space and honest enough to be able to ask this. I mean, we say this almost every week. Some of these things that we're putting out there, they're not easy, right? Sometimes they're a little scary and intimidating to tackle, but when you start to do that, it really is enlightening for how you conduct yourself out there in the world. And it does give you a much greater understanding of maybe why certain things go the way they go, good or bad. And you obviously have the opportunity to, like what you did with your client or your colleague. And, hey, how do you view me? How do it's an opportunity to engage in conversation with your team, your close executives that maybe, you depend on, for your, for your day-to-day responsibility, how people view you and ultimately, what their perceptions are, to engage in that conversation and say, you come across as, I know my wife and I just had this conversation. She said, you walk into the house and you just have this super intense, intimidating look on your face because you're in thinking about something for work, but you don't come in and switch automatically to home environment. I'm like, really? I mean, it's I don't feel like I do that, but at the end of the day, I really can recognize it now because it got pointed out to me that, okay, I need to take a breath before I actually open the door and walk into the house and try and do a little bit better job being present in that environment as opposed to bringing my prior environment with me. So these things have a huge amount of value for us to kind of examine and look at. And we definitely would be interested in what our audience takes from this episode and sort of, what kind of feedback or input that they might provide us. So Donna, how can they do that?
So the best way to do it is go to our Facebook group, Inquiring Minds with Donna Carlin and Steve Harper, and join the group. Tell us about yourself and tell us how these conversations really resonate with you. I think that would be the best way to get hold of us. Obviously from our websites as well, ripplecentral.com for Steve and Donna Carlin with a K.com for me. However, the conversations have been happening in Facebook and in messages from Facebook. So join us there, and you could watch all the old episodes as well.
Yep, absolutely. Well, we greatly appreciate you guys joining us for another episode of Inquiring Minds. We'll be back again very soon with another set of questions, I guarantee you, and another Inquiring Minds conversation. So until then, Donna, take care.
You too. Have a fabulous day.
All right, you as well.